If you are enjoying this podcast and other podcasts on the Dragon Wagon Radio Network, be sure to check out the Dragon Wagon Shop. Awesome t-shirts and mugs from your favorite shows so you can tout your podcast pride, all while supporting your favorite indie podcast network. And make sure to check it often for new items and limited time designs. So shop now at dragonwagonshop.com and get your dragon swag on. It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Welcome back, Quillers. Today's episode, let's talk about some blood, death, and destruction, swords, and melee combat. Because the plays of Shakespeare are filled with all kinds of fun, brutal fighting. In fact, throughout the canon, the stage direction "they fight" can be found 23 times. It is the most common and prevalent stage direction in all of Shakespeare, except for flourish or alarum or entrance or exit. It's "they fight." They fight. And today, to explain some of that fighting with us, is our special guest here on the program. His name is Jesse Durant, and he is a combat specialist. Aren't you, Jesse?
Indeed. I've done many different kinds.
Also an actor, and has been a Shakespearean actor, even in some productions of mine.
Yeah.
And we're glad to have you here with us today to talk about swords and combat.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your background with swords and combat so that we get sort of like some context.
Right. So I guess for about, it's going on like 13 years now. I've been doing a specific type of fighting called SCA, heavy combat fighting.
SCA, that stands for sword carrying assholes.
Often.
That's what I was always told anyway, in like the world of role-playing games and whatnot. But no, what does it really mean?
It stands for Society for Creative Anachronism.
What?
Society for Creative Anachronism.
Creative Anachronism.
Anachronism being recreation of oldie times.
Oh, oldie times.
Yeah.
Oh, not oldie people, just oldie times.
Oh, there's it's a sliding scale. There's oldie people in oldie times, and there's young people in oldie times.
Okay, are there moldy people in oldie times?
Definitely. You can basically find whatever demographic you're looking for in oldie times.
These aren't like people you see like at Comic-Con or whatever. This isn't cosplay.
Like cosplay?
Yeah. Is that what that is or no?
Not really. There's elements of that kind of, because it is in the SCA. A lot of people strive to recreate that sort of thing, so they'll recreate the costumes or what it would be period garb. It's a pretty broad spectrum though, because it goes from like, I think the later part of Roman times all the way up until medieval European, like 1800s or maybe like 1600s. So yeah, it's a pretty broad swath, but
so kind of like when you go to the Renaissance Fair and you see people walking around in stormtrooper costumes.
Usually don't see too much of that.
Oh, okay. So it's not where people just use it as an excuse to wear whatever they want to pull out of their closet and show off at the Renaissance Fair. This is a little more regulated, a little more structured.
Right. And some of the events are a couple weeks long, so you'll see lots of different types of stuff. But yeah, depending on what camp you are, there are different levels of strictness. Some camps are like, your garb has to be from 1350 to like 1417 or something, like a very specific. There are many different periods that people go for, and different strictness, of course, as well. Like some of them are kind of mishmashy, and that's not the most important part of it, So it's pick your level of involvement.
Okay, and so what's your level of involvement?
My level of involvement. I am part of a household called Black Company, and we're a mercenary household. So basically we go to the big events, which are sometimes a couple weeks long or a week long. The main one I go to is Estrella War in Phoenix, and we receive contracts before that. So different kingdoms will bid for us, and we choose which contract we like the best, and that's who we will fight for that war.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say that's who we will fight for,
Yes. I mean, it's actual competitive full contact armor fighting.
Full contact competitive fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Something completely different than what we would see like in
At a
stage
Ren fair.
combat.
Oh, yes, yeah.
When we're dealing with like Shakespeare plays or any plays that require medieval weapons or rapiers, Renaissance style weapons or whatever.
Yeah, pretty fundamentally different. And actually, in the SCA, there are two leagues, I guess. There is the Heavy Suit League, and there's also a complete whole Rapier League as well. So
Okay, so tell me, a Heavy Suit League, does that like guys wearing like full on plate mail and swinging battle axes? Or?
Yeah, you'll see all kinds of things. You'll see guys wearing full suit of plate mail. Like it must weigh 30 pounds, 40 pounds. Like it looks really cumbersome. And then you'll also see guys who are like, we call them the Zerkers or the Berserkers or whatever. So they'll go out wearing only the minimum pieces you have to have covered, which is 3 sides of elbows, 3 sides of your knees. Your kidneys is a big one. So they'll wear like a kidney belt. You have to protect your third vertebra and of course like your head and your neck. So like they'll walk out with nothing on their torso but a kidney belt and like a gorget. And they're just getting slapped around, bruised up. I don't understand it, but hey, live your bliss.
All right. Well, you know, that's a certain level of bravery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, so you go to these things each year, you go on a regular basis. They're like annual events, I'm sure, and they probably occur at different times of the year in different locations, I would think.
Yeah.
And do you like work your way up? Do you become more skilled? Do you enter different contests for different events because you get better at them? Or is there like a champion? Do they have jousting? What other, like, are there, I guess what I'm asking is, are there contest events in addition to the battles that you've talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, and not only for combat, but they have bardic competitions. They have like scribing competitions, horse riding, axe throwing, archery. It's a pretty inclusive thing. You can do anything.
Bardic.
Yeah, bardic competitions.
Wow.
I've heard some pretty bawdy songs.
I'll bet you have. So like when we're talking, so, you know, a lot of people refer to Shakespeare as the bard, right? And in fact, I have been affectionately known as the Bardman.
The Bardman.
Yes. And
I thought it was pronounced Bardman.
Bardman.
Bardman. Yeah, the Bardman.
Yes, the Bardman. So what are these bard competitions? Do they have to write plays? Do they have to write sonnets? What
most commonly it'll be songs with some slight performance aspect. So it'll be like a guy with a lute and his backup singer or something like that, you know.
That's kind of cool.
It's pretty typical. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
And usually they're very narrative type of stories that build, and it may be like 8 verses or something like that. It could be like a really long song sometimes.
What's your competition of choice?
My competition of choice?
Yeah, what's your specialty?
I mostly do just the fighting. I don't do a lot of the other stuff. Like I enjoy it.
I don't need to get better at anything but killing people.
Yeah, I enjoy that it's all there, and I love it, and it makes it so that more people can be involved. But I kind of mostly just focus on the fighting part of it.
And your weapon of choice?
Weapon of choice? Lately, 9-foot spear. It's so much fun.
Wow.
Yeah. Everybody in our group, at least, we start them sword and board, which is sword and shield, which there are many different types of shields too, and they all fight, you know, but some of them fight fundamentally differently. There's door shields if you want to be on the front. We have like a round shield unit that's our fast attack unit that's like made for mobility more. And there's center boss held, or there's, you know, the kind where you put it through the hoop and then hold the handle. So and they're all just different, you know, how you fight's totally different. So,
and I assume that can you think back to like the very first event you ever went to? Was it somebody like invited you to go, or you found it online or in a newspaper ad or something and went, ooh, I'd like to check that out? Like, do you remember how you first initiated your exposure to this?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's see. I came up in Vernal, Utah.
Okay.
Right? And
Utah, a land known for its fierce, ferocious warriors.
Yes. Ferocious warriors and also rocks.
Yeah.
And some rivers. I came up in a town where there was like some of my friends from school would get together at the park, and they'd mess around with these, like, it's not exactly like hard suit fighting. It's more like the safer version. We call it boffing. So it was like it's kind of like LARPing, I guess, but more of but it's not so much like you're throwing magic and stuff. It's more like focus on the finesse type combat style. So it's more like rapier fighting almost, or like light fighting.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but go on with your story.
So we did that for many years, and then I went off to college down in Cedar City, Utah, and our group continued down there, and we our household grew from like 2 branches to 3 branches, and then eventually 4 and 5. So now we've got branches all over the Western United States, and I remember the very first time that I went I was in college, and they were like, oh, we're all going to go this year to Estrella War in Phoenix. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to that. So I don't know.
And what was your first battle like? Did you get pulverized?
It's kind of confusing, like, because you want to train up beforehand. So you want to at least have, you need to be safe. Like, in order to even get carded to go into battle, you have to go through a marshal who checks all your equipment. He checks whether you can defend yourself and whether you know how to like fall over safely so you don't get trampled to death, and all that type of stuff. So you want to have some basic fundamentals before you even go into combat. But it's a whole different thing when it's, like 300 people in front of you trying to kill you.
So you have to go through some training. You have to learn some skill with whatever weapon that you're going to bring into battle, I would assume.
Yeah,
right?
It helps.
And do you need to know what your company strategy is, or what are they, companies, platoons?
Units and
units. You need to know what your unit is responsible for doing in the war, and what your unit strategy is, and who the general is, I would assume, who's commanding the troops.
Yeah. See, as a mercenary household, we are responsible for doing what the people who hire us would like us to do most of the time. And most of the time we listen very closely to like the general or the king that hired us. So, but everything goes through our war master. So we have, the structure is a little different for our branches sometimes, but generally speaking, there's always a war master for each branch. And then when we go to the war, one of the war masters is put in charge for that war. So, the king may be shouting something to you like, oh, fill that hole, get in there, block that column charge. But you're ignoring him for the most part, and you're listening to your war master, and you're like, are we doing that, or are we doing something else? And that makes you able to be more cohesive, just knowing who you're listening to. And your war master's job is to pull together all the information from the kings and stuff.
And the very first time you were on the battlefield, was it like that? Or were you running around going, I have no idea what I'm doing here, and I'm going to get pulverized because I don't have all this training, I don't have all these skills, and I don't know how all this works, and I have to learn?
It was, I remember kind of distinctly those first feelings, actually, but I was nestled pretty safely in the middle of the group. So I was on probably my first battle. I think I was on the second shield wall back from the main wall, and I just the war kind of came to me, and it was like, it was very confusing, and I just tried to stay involved, and try to keep your head, because it gets really weird. Like, you get used to it over time. Like, now I'm used to what to do but at the time I was like, oh, I guess I'll just try not to get hit in the face or something,
So 13 years of participation, you develop knowledge, you develop skill sets, you develop your own comprehension of different strategies and different fighting styles.
Yeah. And you learn how to see things. Like, you learn how to be able to read the field. That's one of the biggest things that you can do, is you need to be able to read your opponent in front of you, the person who's trying to get you. You need to read the people next to him, and you also need to read the whole field. You need to know what flanks are doing. You need to know all that stuff.
Okay, and the reason why I ask you those questions is because I wonder if then, in this area of expertise that you have, and then cross-referencing that with your performance experience and your knowledge and training and schooling in theater arts, and then your knowledge of Shakespeare and the works of Shakespeare, what do you think? Do you think the guy who wrote the plays had some of this battle experience, had some military exposure, some military training? Or do you think he was like you were that first day when you walked onto that field the very first time, not knowing anything?
Well, it's like you said, most of it is they fight, right?
Sure.
I feel like most of the time when I see fight scenes in scripts, it's to move a narrative and to move a character, you know? So he's trying to tell a story, and what the authorship, like Shakespeare plays amazing insight into character motivations and that type of things, right? But it's not very descriptive as far as what happens, you know? Like it's like this guy wins, that guy loses. So I don't know that it necessarily means that there's any knowledge of actual fighting, you know? But at the same time, there are many mentions to different specific types of weapons and things like that. So I feel like there must be some kind of fundamental knowledge.
So there are very specific references to a lot of different weapons and very specific references to fighting styles, especially some of the characters in the Italian plays speak very specific about the way that they handle their sword and the types of terminology they use in fencing terms or in Italian sword and dagger terms, for instance. Right, exactly. Like you know some of them because you're familiar with, like that one right there comes from Romeo and Juliet, right? So Mercutio does a lot of talking about swordsmithing and sword use and uses a whole plethora of terms that only somebody who had been trained or experienced in using a rapier, sword and dagger style most particularly, would be able to have knowledge of those terms that are also happen to be Italian Renaissance terms, not English terms, right?
Makes sense.
My argument would be that based on your experience and knowledge in combat, in weaponry, 13 years of it, is how you're able to, when I ask you a question about this stuff, just immediately, right off the top of your head, deliver the details. Right. But if I'd have asked a Jesse from 13 years ago, what answers do you think I might have received?
You probably would have encountered a Jesse who was scraping for an answer of some kind, you know, like trying to be like, oh, well, I saw this one guy do this thing once, or, you know, like it would have been, I don't know, it's less crystallized. It would have been kind of ephemeral, probably. It was kind of.
So my argument then is that based on the works of Shakespeare and the terminology and the words and the details that other characters in other plays, not just Mercutio and Romeo and Juliet, but many of the history plays, of course, in Macbeth, for instance, there are lots of conversations in these plays where people talk about the type of armor they're using, the type of weaponry, how to prepare for battle, how to go into a battle, the results of battles, the results of death on the battlefield. And I would argue that that bespeaks a knowledge of military action, military combat, and the results of military combat. Especially, we have a lot of characters who come back from a battle and describe how bloody it was, how horrendous it was, how many people fell and died, how many soldiers,
specific
what types of
injuries too.
Yes, and even specific types of troops. Right? Like they, mention the difference between like foot soldiers and archers and that type of a thing, right? So I'm wondering if that doesn't open the door for us a little bit into the mind of the writer and help us pinpoint, okay, this writer must have had some sort of military knowledge or experience in order to be able to convey these things.
Yeah. I mean, you can't just pull that out of nowhere. You got to know that to even put it on the paper. Especially, there's no Google back then. So it's not like you could be like, let me look up some military terms on Google and put those in my play.
Yeah.
You
Let me Google what a halberd is. Have you ever used a halberd?
Not precisely. I've used glaives, which are used in kind of the same way. They don't have the axe head on the end, but it can be used for thrusting and striking. So,
okay.
So similar
sort of
things.
like a pike?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a glaive is usually a little bit shorter than a pike. I mean, like a glaive will be like 6 foot long or something like that, usually with like a long, broad striking edge on it. But yeah, it's kind of similar, having a dual functionality. The 9-foot spear that I fight with, usually, that I kind of prefer, there's no striking edge on that. It's only stabbing.
It's purely thrusting weapon, or I would assume that there are different styles of fighting or different moves that the blunt end can be used as either a defensive weapon or even an aggressive weapon at some point, right? If you've got both hands on the.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. For example, usually with the 9-foot weapons, you can't have what's colloquially referred to as a nubby. But with like a 6-foot weapon, you would have your thrusting edge and your striking edge. And then when you flip it over, you've got a little, slightly cushioned. There's certain rules of like what kind of weapons you can use. They still hurt, but they won't kill you. So
sure.
So you can like cushion the bottom edge, and you can pop it up. So if somebody gets too close to you, you can just kind of choke up on it and like jack them right in the gorget or something, you know? So that, and even with the long spear, you want to use the haft for blocking if they come up on you. So like you can switch to one hand, hold your spear out to them, and if you like stick it right in their armpit, basically, you've stopped their ability to really swing at you. So you can kind of block them with that, and then if you have a little dagger on your belt, you can pull it out and go to town, that sort of thing. Or like you can also
pull it out and go to town.
You got to go to town, man. Or you can like cross-check sometimes. There's specific rules in the SCA about that. You can only cross-check across someone's shield or similar like haft. So you can't like cross-check someone in the face because that hurts very badly.
Okay, and obviously the weapons that you're using in these reenactment battles are not bladed weapons and they're not edged weapons. And
well, I'd say like
are they made out of foam? Are they made out of plastic? Like what are they? How are they constructed?
First of all, they're not I would say there's a distinction between these type of battles and reenactment battles, because it's reenacting the time, but usually a reenactment battle is the type of battle where it's kind of choreographed. You know what I mean? The
outcome is already known because it is a reenactment.
Whereas anything can happen in these ones because they're fully competitive. So slightly different. But a lot of the weapons are made out of rattan. So it's like a compressed bamboo. And then if I'm using that for my sword, for example, I would want to wrap that with strapping tape, so it holds it together, so it won't what you call broom. It'll start to like break apart as you hit people over the head with it.
It'll splinter.
Yes, yeah. Okay. So you got to keep it nice and tight, and then you wrap some athletic tape around it, and then make a kill strip. So you have a clearly marcated area that's your killing area of this. So I have to hit you with the kill strip, or else it's a flat and it doesn't count.
Okay.
So you also have to put a tip if you're going to thrust, which I do. I love thrusting. It's a very underutilized method in the heavy combat, especially with sword and shield. People like to like hit people, but they don't stab enough. I don't know. I just love it. It's very underutilized and it's so satisfying. But anyway, so you got to have a little give on the.
There's some advice for those of you at home. Stabbing is underutilized, yet so satisfying.
Yes. Right.
No wonder why you like to use your long spear.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, what kind of head is on your spear? Like, what is it made? Is it foam? How do you do that?
Yes.
You're thrusting something at people and you're not actually trying to kill them for real.
Mm-hmm.
What's the solution?
The old school types, and the one I have is one of these too. It is like a foam. It's a pretty hard foam, but it's got a little bit of progressive give on the end. I would say it's probably, I don't know, like 6 inches of foam or something like that on the tip of something that long. It's 3 inches for like a sword for progressive give, but for the spear, it's got a pretty broad head, so it's got a wide area of contact. And the idea of that is it's not supposed to be an inch thick or less, because it can go through the visors and stuff on the helmets. So so yeah, it's got that, and it still hits really hard. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, we're not trying to kill each other, but you can really get somebody. And there's different methods of being polite sometimes. Like, if someone's not looking at you at all, you can just like tap their cup with your spear, and it's like, I could have jacked you, but I would not like to hit you in the cup with this right now.
Yeah, you are now dead.
Yeah. So there's polite things that you can do.
You are politely dead.
Yes. And my spear tip also has a shield hook on it. So I can lay it on top of a shield and pull it down so my spear buddy next to me can get him, sort of thing.
Sure.
And then there are low profile tips now, which are a lot thinner, so they can slip through smaller holes, but they're still pretty safe. So,
you know, it's interesting because you talk about like a polite move or a polite kill move or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we do see a lot of in a lot of Shakespeare plays is after the fight, when someone's dying, usually the opponent is very polite about allowing the person to get in that final statement or that final soliloquy or
say your last little bit, man.
Yes, and then die. You know, one of the things that always cracks me up about certain Shakespeare plays is a character is dead and then they come back to life and talk a little longer and then they finally die.
I've just been stabbed through one lung. I can still keep going.
Right.
Well, I think like some of that is could be. I mean, obviously for story purposes, he's got to have some closure, right?
Sure.
But there's also a thing where I don't know, you gain like a kind of respect for your opponent to a certain degree. Like there's a certain part of a person that you don't see when you're not under those circumstances. Like you could know a person, but you don't know what they're going to be like when they're fighting because their whole mentality changes and their whole what they're willing to do to get what they want changes. It all changes. So I don't know, like to a certain degree, if you fight someone you respect, like you really feel that respect to a certain,
Well, there's a level, especially during the Renaissance period, a level of honor to soldiering that was important, especially amongst the noble classes. Maybe the foot soldiers who have been recruited out of the fields, they're farmers who were carrying pitchforks and now they're carrying broadswords because their feudal lord said, I need an army.
Yeah.
Go to war
with this pitchfork.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. I mean, you give me wheat, so I guess I'll go.
Right. I've got a shovel. Will that help? So, and then you've got the noble classes who were leading those people into battle. In Henry IV, one of the things that Falstaff gets charged with doing is go find an army, go recruit people into the army.
And he gets them all killed.
He does. He does. And it's actually it's not funny, but it is funny. It's a funny moment in the play where he talks about it. He says, I've led all my ragamuffins to their deaths. And that's where that term originates, ragamuffin.
That's where it starts?
That's the ragamuffins? Yep, ragamuffin.
What a great term.
Yep, ragamuffin. It's credited to Falstaff, who also, by the way, is the one who said that discretion is the better form of valor.
Man, it's uncanny how great these expressions are, and they came all from Falstaff.
Falstaff's cowardice. Ironically,
now everyone uses it completely non-ironically.
I know,
discretion is the better part of valor,
right? And they use it all with so much valor and so much honor and might. And if you realized where it really came from, is it came from the biggest coward in the canon. But yeah, he talks about having led all these guys to their deaths because they weren't experienced soldiers, because they don't know what they're doing, because they hadn't fought before, many of them.
And if Falstaff got an army, chances are he probably got them from the places he was hanging out.
Absolutely.
So they're all like brothel army people.
They're all from East.
They're all from bars.
Yeah, exactly. But in that same play, there are talks about multiple battles and the results of multiple battles. And one of the things that Henry reports to his cousin, the Earl of Westmoreland, is when one of his generals comes back and says that he saw the Scots defeated. And he says 10,000 bold Scots, 22 knights. Right? So there's a huge separation there between who the common guys were out in the fields fighting and who were the knights, the noblemen, the ones who were who could afford all of the good armament and could afford to have nice swords and also had the proper training in battle and in soldiering and in military practices.
There's a huge difference between having that armor and not having that armor too.
Absolutely. And also then a huge difference in the type of honor they're fighting for, the name, the family's sake, the crest, the colors that they're wearing and that their men are wearing to represent them and their families. All of that becomes very clear in the Shakespearean texts when you look at these plays that involve these types of wars or battles. And it's funny how you say they come to respect their opponent, and it's all, I think, partially also because they're all courtiers when they're not knights.
Yeah. So it's all like, it's a big rumor mill, and you hear what everyone else under every sigil is doing all the time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like its own little game.
Does that happen out at your battles?
Actually, yes. Yeah. Because there's all the different kingdoms, and for the most part, there's tournaments that are held for like crown tournaments. So for the most part, whoever makes it to the end of the crown tournament, it may mean they're the best. It may mean not necessarily that all the time, but usually someone with, a lot of skill. And then that they become the king of that area. So the U.S. and actually the whole world is split up into all these different kingdoms, and they end up fighting each other, and they have different interactions with each other. And so it's interesting being a mercenary household because we fought for so many different kingdoms and different leaders and stuff like that. So we get to see like different sides of it all the time, but we never have to like bend the knee really. So we don't have to.
You're just mercs. You're nothing but a bunch of mercs.
Oh, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would hate to have to be like, Your Majesty, I'll do whatever you say all the time.
You don't want to be a serf?
Not really.
No.
No. I mean,
fiefdom is not in your future.
I don't want to knock it because a lot of people like it and there's a lot of good things about it, but I would never. I like being a merc. Mm-hmm.
Paid to the fight. My sword is for hire to the highest bidder, huh? That's how it works.
Yeah, and
you're a Belgian.
Sometimes
you're a Hessian.
We're the Hessians.
You're the Hessians.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always know that I have my people at my back. So I don't have to ever worry about that. So wherever I go, whoever I'm fighting for, works for me.
Have there ever been any like moments where your house has been split? Where like half of you said, no, we want to fight for this king. And the other half said, no, let's accept that king's offer. And then suddenly you have your own internal civil war going on.
Those arguments definitely happen because people have different relationships. So like somebody might be really close with the guy who's getting us for like Outlands. And then somebody else is really close with the Artemisian guy. And we're like, oh, this one's good. Or like we argue over the specifics of like, oh, there's two halves of leather in this, we could use this to make armor. Why are you going with this one? It's trinkets and booze. It's like so like we have those fights, but it's always decided, pretty much democratically. And we have elders at the head of each house too to tie break and stuff like that.
And they pay you in leather and trinkets and booze?
Yeah, and weapons and all kinds of stuff. We've gotten just all kinds of stuff.
So I
have a bronze elephant at home.
There's like a bronze elephant.
A solid bronze elephant.
That could be valuable.
It is. Somebody was like, oh yeah, I work with bronze. That's probably like $50 worth of bronze right there. I'm like, oh, cool. I dig it. But I'm keeping it as an elephant because it's awesome.
Okay. And it's a trophy in a sense too, right? Like it's the spoils of war.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It feels good.
Yeah. Part of your accumulated treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Like a pirate almost.
Oh yeah, I just have a bunch of weird stuff laying around the house that I've gotten.
So I could be like, let's say I'm the king of whatever kingdom it is, right? If we were gonna put it into Shakespearean terms, you could say, okay, I'm the king of France, right? And I need some mercenaries to help defend against Henry V, who's coming over from England, and I want to hire you guys. So I could say, all right, I've got 2 sheets of hard leather. I've got 3 bastard swords. I've got 4 longbows. Give you 2 goats and a mule. What?
Yeah.
What? That's how it works. That's how the bidding process goes.
Pretty much, they have to submit a formal contract. So they write up everything specifically that they're offering for us, and then we get to go over them in our own house meetings and kind of parse them out.
Can you counter? Can you be like, no, throw in 2 extra goats and it's a deal?
You can. We try not to rub people the wrong way too often because they hire us. So it's like it's a fine line. As a mercenary household, you have to be respectful to everyone, but also you can't let people bully you over, and you have to do what's best for yourself all the time. And you also have to be like good, or else no one wants to hire you. So you got to keep the skill level really high as well. But yeah,
have you ever changed alliances like midway? Like has anyone ever come and said, hey, we'll pay you more, come to our side?
No self-respecting mercenary company would do that. Well, maybe not, but
Tell the
nah,
truth.
We're a fairly honorable household. I don't think we would do anything like that. The only exception being like if the sides are too unbalanced, sometimes a marshal will come and pull a unit from one side to the other.
What happens to the payment when that happens?
It remains the same. There's nothing that anyone can do about that, so it stays. And usually it's only for a battle or two anyway. So
there's like the great arbiter in the sky who goes, "These fields are uneven."
yeah, they like more or less the marshals will just pick a unit that's about the size of the difference. So it could be any unit depending on their size.
Well, that doesn't seem right. I mean, in real life, there are going to be battles that are fought by larger armies versus smaller armies and vice versa. And sometimes the smaller army can still win.
Yeah. And it always begins that way. Like they won't do that unless it's like they've been crushed like 4 or 5 times in a row. And then they might be like, okay, let's throw them a unit.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So for the most part, the battles will start out.
Like this isn't fun anymore.
And it can be pretty unbalanced sometimes. Like sometimes. And I've also equally seen the smaller side win plenty of times, you know. Like we're often on the side that has to fight harder. But we just call it a target-rich environment.
Henry wasn't supposed to win, right? He was way outnumbered.
Yeah.
And he still pulled it off. So, you know, it can happen.
Yeah, and it's really only a matter of like, and there's so many things that go into it. Like there's field tactics. You have to know what the movement of the field is. You have to be in the right place to like get the linchpin of the battle. It's about threat level. You know, you have to be able to be more threatening. I refer to it as like a threat bubble, basically. If your unit walks in on a line and you've got all your shieldmen and they're all super hungry and you can like feel it off of them, then sometimes you can just push a line back and push a line back and push a line back. Threat level is hugely important in combat.
And that would explain Henry V's victory and why Shakespeare immortalizes it in his play with that super famous speech. And you have to assume that it was a speech like that increased the threat level of his soldiers, that intimidated the enemy in such a way as to take the advantage away from them.
There's no substitute for being a badass. like you got to just, and that's the thing. Great leadership can pull the morale of an entire unit together. And if you're in the right place and you get the momentum of win behind you, like you can just build and build and build, and you can just eat people up. Like it's a pretty tasty feeling to be like, I Pac-Man this entire line and just kill them all. It's a good feeling.
There's also that really famous instance in history where Queen Elizabeth goes to the front and gives like a rally speech to her troops and has that famous line where she says, you know, I may have the body of a woman, but I have the heart of a prince, I think she says, which is very much like her once more into the breach, my friends, kind of moment, you know? So who's the best, like once more into the breach ruler or leader or king or general out in these contests that you're aware of?
Oh, there's been some pretty good ones. I always enjoy the years we fight for Keegan. I'm trying to think what specific. I think he's Artemisian, but he was the king a couple years, and he hired us, I think, both years. But Keegan's a great speaker. He gets everybody riled up. I think he might be out of the game now. I think he might be retired, but I always enjoyed fighting for him.
Where do old soldiers go?
I don't know. They go to just their mundane jobs, I guess.
They go back to the accounting division on the 5th floor.
Yep. That's the real life stuff. But within our own household too, that type of speech, I guess, or that duty falls to usually the war masters. Sometimes the elders, but the war masters, it's their job to get everybody pumped up for battle, get everybody walking in sync, and to just be like, let's go out there, let's kick some ass.
Well, now that does make for a good question, though. So what happens? Let's say you've been doing this. You say you've been doing this for 13 years. Let's say you do it for another 13 years. And at the end of another 13 years, you're like, my knees, my back, my shoulder, I'm too old for this crap. I can't do this anymore. No more battlefields for me. Is there a place for people? You've mentioned the elders a couple of times. Is there a place for people like that to still participate, even if they can't fight anymore?
Yeah. I mean, you can't walk 10 feet without running into a story like that. Everyone's busted up. Like, everyone's like, there's so many people who are injured, and like they come in and they fight whenever they feel like they can. They hop out when they can't, you know? So the young dude's always going hard. Like it's a badge of courage to fight every single battle all week, you know, or, you know, but if you're injured, you need to take care of yourself. And everyone in the entire house will tell you the same thing. Like look out for yourself first. But even in that case, there's always a place for you. Like our household, it's like Black Company's like a second family to me. I love everybody there, and it's like it's growing all the time, but it's definitely like a safe space, and we all enjoy each other's company so much that we just mess around all week, and it's
a safe space except for on the battlefield.
Right. And say except for right in front of us.
Yeah. Great.
Right. But yeah, it's inclusive for many other things because it's all week long. We spend a lot of our time in camp hanging out, you know.
So you could retire from battle without retiring from the organization.
Absolutely.
Or being involved. One of the things I always say about one of the things that I love about the Shakespearean canon, and one of the things that I think that actors who get involved with Shakespeare, whatever age they happen to be when they first get involved with Shakespeare, once they wake up to the canon and see all of the wonderful characters there are,
then they can't play Hamlet anymore.
And that you can play until you die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can start, you know, specifically my little girl Stella started as the little Indian boy in A Midsummer Night's Dream last year. She was 4 years old. And she can play Shakespeare roles all the way into her 80s now with Queen Margaret in Richard III, if she so chooses. You know,
it's a long canon.
It's a very long canon, and for any actor, and all the roles in all the ages of life in between, as Jaques would say in As You Like It, all the world's a stage, and he goes through the 7 ages of man. Well, in a sense, there's the 7 ages of man or the 7 ages of woman can be played throughout the Shakespearean canon by either gender in either sequence of roles, especially through those history plays where you can play Margaret. One actress could play Margaret for 30 years because through the Henry VI plays and then Richard III, she ages 30 plus years during that sequence of time. So that's a remarkable role for an actress to like say, I'm going to sink my teeth into Margaret and play her in all 4 plays.
It's good if you're good for it because then you got job security for a little bit.
That's true too. It's one of the reasons why I think Shakespearean companies maintain Shakespearean companies is because company members know what they have to look forward to. They know what's coming in their future. You know, they know you could play Romeo at 16 and play Lear at 80 and have hundreds of roles in between.
A lot of good stuff in
of
there.
all types. Yeah. So I think it's good to know that people who are involved in this organization can continue to be a part of it and continue to be involved, even if it means they're not picking up a sword anymore or a 9-foot spear?
Yeah, the 9-foot spear.
A 9-foot spear.
Yeah, much taller than me.
I think I would be knocking people out unintentionally if I was carrying around a 9-foot spear. I'd so Laurel and Hardy everybody, like just turning around, kaplow, kaplow. Oops,
smacking
sorry.
them with it on both sides.
It would become like what was that movie that Peter Dinklage was in before he was famous for Game of Thrones, where they're like a bunch of role-playing game guys and they end up actually fighting some kind of monster or dragon or something. But
I don't know. I want to watch that though.
You've never seen it?
That sounds really cool.
Check it out. Look up Peter Dinklage's IMDb.
Oh, no, I know what one you're talking about.
I can't think of the name of it, but it's sort of a comedy. It ends up kind of bloody and some people actually die in it, I think. But it's sort of a comedy. That's how I would be. I'd be like the guy who's like turning it into a comedy when it's not supposed to be.
Battles like that though. Like, I don't know. What is it? Like, what's the old saying that comedy is just tragedy plus distance or something like that? So it's like, if you're on the other side of the field and you see somebody fall on their face, you're like, oh, that's kind of funny.
Schadenfreude, whatever that word is,
Yeah.
the German word.
Schadenfreude.
We enjoy other people's failures or not.
We take pleasure in other people's pain or something.
Other
like that.
people's missteps, I think, is
yeah.
what it is, though, right? It's not just like a tragic thing that happens to them. It has to be something that they caused for themselves.
Right.
Right.
They brought it upon themselves.
Right,
so.
right. Like we don't laugh at somebody who gets wiped out by a tornado.
No.
Unless they were told to evacuate and didn't, then that might be, well, dummy, you should have known.
Why did you do that?
Hiding in the bathtub was not the best idea, Dorothy. But we might, laugh at somebody who tripped over a tree root on the sidewalk.
Or gets so angry that they hit themselves in the junk or something.
Right.
I say that because I just saw that happen a couple days ago.
Yeah. This tool isn't working. Throws it, comes back, bang.
Yeah, hits him in the face.
Yeah, sure. That would be that kind of a thing, I think.
That instant karma.
So that has to happen a lot out on these battlefields.
Yeah, I would say.
How often does somebody get really hurt?
So they check all the gear. I mean, it happens. There are people, like, heart attacks happen, like, fairly, I want to say regularly, but like maybe one a year. I don't know.
Well, how many? Well, okay. How many people?
On the field?
Yeah.
For a stray war, usually it's like 200 or 300 on each side.
Okay, so 200 or 300 people, all different age ranges, all different backgrounds. Maybe some of them do not actually work out very often.
No, yeah, I know 100% for sure that these dudes strap on this armor and are like they
weekend warrior type.
Yeah, they are like I'll be good at this forever, or like I don't know. They're like I don't even know what they don't train.
That cheeseburger before this battle. Oh,
yeah. There's no substitute for just stretching or
I'm
like
my
anything.
Chest.
Do something to get ready for this. Don't just walk on there and get hit.
I'm going to eat this big hunk of cheese and bread before I go out and fight. Yeah. Oh, my arteries are clogged. I'm wounded.
Those dudes are out there. And not only that, I bet you back in the olden times, like for real, people, there was the same problem.
It had to be.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's Falstaff. That's exactly what Falstaff is.
It's the laws of averages, right? It's going to happen. Sure. Any large group of people. Do they keep like an ambulance out there or paramedics on staff?
Whole teams of paramedics, couple ambulances. They take it very seriously and they're on it instantly. And there's the safety for that is if you see someone take a spill or like someone's in trouble, you yell hold. Everyone around you yells hold, and then the marshal comes in and everybody takes a knee so they can, and you hold a spear up next to the guy so they can identify him immediately, like where to go. And the paramedics take them. They've got ambulances to take them right into town and stuff like that. So They take it very seriously, and usually it's something like that. It's a lot of like, what's the word I'm looking for when your joint pops out? Dislocations.
Dislocations.
A lot of dislocations. Usually people don't die unless they do something crazy like not wear their gorget or something like that, which has happened a few times. Sometimes people get like their windpipe, got it or something. It's not good, but you got to just wear all your safety gear.
So people have died.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm sure they have. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I don't know if there are records of this or not. I'd be curious to know. And I'm going to have to talk to some of my friends in the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship at what they might know about this. But it seemed to me that based on the number of battle sequences that there are in the Shakespearean canon and in other plays of the time, as well, not just the plays of Shakespeare, but the contemporaries of Shakespeare also had fight sequences and battle scenes in some of their plays. And the fact that they didn't have foam and rubber and plastic and that kind of stuff, they probably were using real weapons.
What safety level were these guys working at?
That's a great question, and what I'm getting at, what I'm curious to know, and if there's any record of this anywhere, it'd be hard to find probably, but I'm curious to know if there are any cases of actors ending up dead on stage because somebody got a little overzealous or a thrust didn't meet a parry or whatever.
Or like the tang of the blade breaks and the knife goes flying off or something.
Even in my own lifetime and experience, and the number of Shakespeare plays that I've produced, directed, or been in, I have seen multiple injuries occur during well choreographed, what should have been very safe uses of stage combat weaponry. Mm-hmm. And this is stuff without edges, dulled down or flattened, but still, it is still metal and it is still capable of causing injury. And I've seen several. I can only imagine in those days and those times, people got hurt pretty badly.
Yeah. And I would say that they probably still had safety weapons. Like there's no reason for them to use like a real sword. Well, I would say that, especially, I don't know what suspension of disbelief was like back then. It definitely could have happened, but even for purposes of martial training, you would use like foils. You would use a blunted rapier to practice, and if you were doing like broadsword, you would have a blunted broadsword that you would just knock the crap out of each other with to practice with. There are always like safety weapons to get up to the point of proficiency. So I mean, at the very least, you would hope they were using those.
Well, and you could also think that the actors are commoners who aren't allowed to be carrying around rapiers and weapons of that magnitude, nor could they afford them either, most likely.
There were laws that they couldn't carry them. They were just told no.
Only the nobility was allowed to carry like a rapier on their side.
Oh, dang, that's whack.
You can't just be walking around town with your sword like that without it. You had to have, remember, there were restrictions about head coverings, and you had to wear certain types of head coverings, and you can only wear these head coverings if you're of this class, and only these head coverings if you're of this class. There are a lot of rules and structures to society.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, well, it was a totalitarian state. What do you want?
Yeah. What do you do? What are you going to do?
What do you want? It's a class system. It's a feudal system. And you can tell by the works of Shakespeare that he was very much in favor of feudalism. A lot of the plays uphold some of the basic precepts of feudalism, and many of them are designed specifically to uphold the legitimacy of the Tudor dynasty as well, and the anointing of kings, in this case, the anointing of a queen. I mean, as being ordained by God.
Yeah, a lot of the times you'll see that in Shakespeare, where it's because this man's a noble, he has some kind of special power, or special rights, but like he plays heavily into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, not just anybody was allowed to just walk around carrying a sword. It didn't work that way. First of all, why would you want to unless you had a need for it, or unless you had been properly trained in it, right? If you're let's say, son of a glove maker, for instance, you probably don't own a sword. You probably don't need to own a sword. And you probably never carried a sword before in your life for any reason whatsoever.
And if you have a whole gaggle of untrained people just walking through the streets with swords,
that could be very dangerous.
Yeah. Any bar fight, they're like, all right, I'm going to hit you with this.
Daggers. Yeah. Everybody had a dagger. It was their number one eating utensil. Right. So, there were probably plenty of knife fights, but not like sword duels. That's a whole nother story.
Would have been expensive too.
Exactly that. And why would you spend that money on something like that when you really don't have any use for it?
Like, we kind of just need bread.
Yeah. But I want this sword. It's so pretty.
Bread though.
Bread.
Very hungry.
Bread. Sausage. Just some sausage. No swords. Sausage.
Let's not get carried away.
Right?
That's expensive.
Just bread. Yeah, so, that's part of one of the reasons why I wanted you to come in today, was not only because I'm fascinated by the whole idea and aspect of like going into another land with all these other people who are upholding the fiction of this other land. Because I enjoy going to like a Renaissance fair where you get a feel of that as well.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is a completely different thing, because there aren't tourists, there aren't members of the public wearing their flip-flops and sandals and swimsuits walking around.
It's not as exhibitionist.
Right.
Like, it'll be like the people in it, and they're like trying to convince their friends to come with them. Like, you want to try this cool medieval thing? Why don't you come this weekend or whatever?
What happens if you're not wearing like the proper garb? Like if you're like dressed too modern, do they kick you out?
Nah, there's really no consequence. I mean, you might get made fun of.
Like,
but that's
like, you're like, I'm the blue jean knight.
I'm the blue jean knight. Actually, okay. There was last time I went to war. Have you seen the Bud Light Knight commercials?
Yes.
There was an actual Bud Light Knight with full plate blue Bud Light armor
that he made out of cans. That he made out of aluminum cans.
No, it was up to spec.
Boxes?
It was like steel.
Oh,
it was
wow.
Mild steel, or well, I don't even know if it was mild steel, but it was some kind of steel.
Okay.
It was legit.
That's way too much time and money on your hands right there.
I know. I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's
Why
the other
ruin
question.
a perfectly good set of armor for a chuckle?
That's the other question I had is like, so you said that there were crown competitions and that the winners of the crown competitions end up the kings of their area, their region, their
Kingdoms.
kingdom. King. Like, well, go figure.
Yeah.
King is
King of a kingdom?
not their dookie.
King of my county? Right.
Yes.
My dookie. Slip that one in.
Duchy. I always wondered how you pronounce that. Is it dookie or duchy? He's a duke, not a Dutch. She's a duchess, though.
Duchy.
That's one of those weird ones.
You think it'd have to be Dutchy, right? I don't know, though. I have no idea at all.
Anyway, we digress.
We did a little bit.
What I wanted to know is, can like some millionaire come in and buy a kingdom and like buy his way into the leadership because he's got the money and he can afford good armor and he can afford good weapons and he can afford to buy the best mercenaries because he can offer them everything they want? Like, is that happen?
Nah. No, I'll elaborate. Like you really can't. You have to like you can't be the king without winning the tournament, and that comes with a lot of things. It helps to have good gear, but you kind of will get diminishing returns on what you're spending money on at some point if you don't have the skill to back it up. And you're fighting some of like the best fighters too at that point, so it's kind of hard to get in there. And I've seen like, I don't know, like sometimes you see people fighting less than honorably because they get too excited in tournaments and stuff like that. But you still have to be like really good to get even to that point. So you can't really just buy a kingdom. There's no way to do it.
In that way, the fiction is really fiction. Because in the real world,
oh yeah, you could definitely just buy a kingdom. Yeah,
you could buy a keep, you could buy a castle, you could buy an army to defend and protect that castle, and you're the boss.
But to a certain degree, there are a lot of politics. So I don't know, like if you used your money to influence people and to win friends and influence people, like you could find yourself in a position where you're more likely to get put forward for the, like anyone can join the crown tourney, but I don't know. I feel like there's still a way to get clout that way, probably.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So there is somewhat of a class system, but it's more merit-based and self-imposed.
Yes. Yeah, that's
rather than, this is the king and he's ordained by God and he has all the money.
Right. Which is like a huge control mechanism. Like, don't question him. He's our king forever now.
Right.
Yeah. But it's more merit based.
Well, and Elizabeth used her power in very interesting, very unique ways that helped her maintain her power and either provided favor or not, depending upon what message she was trying to send to a particular nobleman or a particular earl or whatever.
She's Pavlovianly rewarding them for good behavior, kind of.
Right. And one of the things that she would do is she would just come visit.
Oh, see, if she's cool enough, that's good motivation enough. In some ways.
She would just pop in and visit. Hi, I'm coming to stay with you for a month.
But even that, you'd be able to brag to all your friends, You'd be like,
except she's bringing her entire entourage with her and they all need to eat.
Oh, yeah. Eat you right out of house and home.
Literally. And she would do that. She would bankrupt people.
Oh, dang. Would she do that as a punishment too?
Yes.
Oh, what?
Yes.
And they can't do anything about it.
That's exactly right.
Stranglehold.
Yes. She just show up with all of her entourage and everything and say, I'm going to plop down here for a couple of months with you.
That's brutal.
And you are going to give me the best of everything because I'm the queen.
Like,
and once you are flat broke, I'm leaving.
Wow.
Goodbye. Thanks for the nice visit. You're such a wonderful host.
As soon as the goose stops coming, Queen's out of there.
Yeah. She would do that to people.
That's crazy. Sit on someone's chest until they suffocate.
On the other side of that, on occasion, she was known for being a real stingy woman, right? Like total skinflint, right? But on occasion, she would do something like that. And then as compensation, she would give somebody like the tin trade or shipping licenses so that they could earn the money back.
Right. Or like a title. So he leveraged
or
this.
lands or whatever. And then on occasion, she would give like a jewel or something of value, like actual value that could then be sold if need be to replenish funds or whatever, except it was really bad form to sell a gift from the queen. Right?
Be like, I lost it. Also, here's my new carriage.
Right.
Check it out.
Right. Oh, and I bought the carriage from the Earl of Northumberland, and look, his wife is now wearing that necklace you gave my wife last month.
Whoops.
Right. That could be a problem.
Yeah. You got to make sure you got to take the Silk Road all the way down and sell it somewhere very far away.
Right. If you look at Macbeth, for instance, when Duncan announces, he says, we're coming to your castle, and Macbeth rides ahead and arrives, and that's when Lady Macbeth has the famous moment where she's like, let's kill him.
This is perfect.
Right.
Let's get him.
And then when Duncan does arrive, though, like the first thing he says when he sees her is he says it twice too. He says, see our most gracious hostess, right? He says see twice. Like, wow, look at her. She's such a vision. Not only in that she is who she is, but that she was able to prepare so quickly, because he knows that his barely announced arrival with all of he brings with him is a huge inconvenience to any household.
Yeah.
Right.
And she's probably so enthused too, she's probably really excited, and that reads. So he's like, oh, look at her. She's like so in for this. And he doesn't necessarily know why she's
right.
like vibrant. Oh, wow. She's
so excited to see
me. She has so
me.
much energy.
She's so happy I'm coming to visit. And then though later on in the play, when Banquo and Macbeth are alone together, Banquo has a line where he says, he's talking about the king, and he says, His Majesty is gone to bed for the night, and thanks you for your gracious hosting, and gives to your wife this jewel. And he hands over some sort of jewel, probably very valuable jewel, as sort of the king's payment in recompense to the household for the cost he knows that it associates for him to be there, which demonstrates that he is a gracious and benevolent king, unlike Queen Elizabeth, who'd show up and eat you bone dry and disappear, right? And so you have to wonder if that isn't just a little under the skirt kind of stab by the writer at the current monarch.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Like, this is how you behave when you stay at someone's place.
This is how benevolent rulers behave. They recompense their hosts. Also, it's setting up what Macbeth does say, like, he is well loved. He is a well-loved king, and it will look bad upon us if he dies here
at our house.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
It's not a good look.
Right. So, there's all those layers in there. Do you ever get rewarded for like a great battle, like Macbeth, who gets a whole nother thanedom?
Yeah. I'm trying to think specifically what that has been in the past, but yeah, it's definitely pretty regular. A lot of times, like the knights and the kingdom people will have meetings in between battles and things like that. Or if they're knighting a squire from a squirehood to like a knighthood, they'll do that between battles, usually on the battlefield. So oftentimes they'll bring some of our commanders up or something and be like, oh, this battle hinged on this happening, and it's all because of War Master Lash, or like, all these types of things. So a lot of commendations, favors, special gifts. Sometimes they give like home brewed meads, or like trinkets, something like that, like a sash or a necklace or
battle
a ring.
Favors.
Yeah.
I played one season of junior tackle football the summer before my first year of high school. And our coach used to give stickers out after every game to stick on our helmet.
Ah, nice.
And you got a sticker that they were called stick marks.
Stick marks.
Yeah, because a real stick mark is a smear on your helmet of what you hope is the other team's color.
Oh, right.
On your helmet.
Mm-hmm.
But if you didn't actually have like a real stick mark on your helmet,
you get a metaphorical stick mark.
You could get a metaphorical stick mark, a sticker that you stuck on your helmet for a great play, scoring a touchdown, intercepting the ball, stopping a run, whatever the different things. So I'm just wondering if like out there in the battlefield, someone's paying attention and going, oh, Jesse gets 3 stick marks because he took out 3 opponents or.
Yeah. We're always watching each other because half of the fun is being able to go back to the campfire and everyone's drinking and you're like, well, guess what Damien did? He went out and took an entire line of spears by himself. I watched him just come right on the side and take it. So like we all tell stories about each other. So we're all watching each other, and oftentimes we'll group up. If we get separated, it'll be like somebody yell out black company and then like 4 guys will come out of the crowd and be like, okay, we're all together now. Or that sort of thing. So
okay, this is either going to be the next podcast that this network is going to begin, or it's going to be a great coffee table book that you're going to write, and it's going to be called SCA War Stories.
Oh, I would have unlimited footage of this stuff. Like I could have people in our group tell you stories for 2 years straight of this type of stuff.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you came in today and that we got a chance to talk about this. It's a little bit off of what some of our normal topics are here on the program in that it's not really a big issue as far as the authorship goes. But what I wanted to point out through talking to you about your experience and expertise and how many years you've been doing this and how you've had to learn over those years, mostly all of that vocabulary that you used in explaining, some of which I'm sure some of our listeners are going, what did he say? What's a thing on the
the gorget?
Gorget.
The gorget protects your neck and
I'm a gorget cook. I know that. At least my wife seems to think so, but I don't know. I didn't know that it was something that you wore on your neck.
Yeah, you don't want to cook gorgets. They mostly just taste like sweat and leather.
The point being is that that's stuff that you had to learn over time through exposure to it and through a great deal of exposure to it over quite a number of years and participation in the activity. Yeah. And a lot of people seem to think that the writer of these plays, if they believe that it's the man from Stratford, that he just miraculously had all of this knowledge and information and experience about all of these topics, including this very important topic that occurs in the plays. And it involves military knowledge, military combat knowledge specifically, and knowledge about weaponry and knowledge about certain shields and armor and all that goes with that. And I think it's fascinating that if you look at your own personal experience, like I remember I asked you at the beginning of the program to think about that very first battle, that very first time,
yeah,
as opposed to the most recent one, and how much your knowledge of this skill and art form, we'll call it an art form.
Fighting
developed.
is absolutely an art. Mm-hmm.
Well, they call it the martial arts, right? For a reason. And it is exactly that. Martial meaning impact, weapon, ouch.
And then
and
the arts of
art of that, right?
Yeah.
So thanks, Jess, for coming in today and sharing a little bit about this with us and letting us to connect it a little bit to the Shakespeare authorship question. We want to remind our listeners that they can stream all our episodes from their favorite podcast site, whether that be Spotify or iTunes, or is there one called Thrasher? Stitcher.
Yeah.
That's it. Go to Stitcher and stream all our other episodes. If you haven't caught up, there are many of them there now for you. A new episode every 2 weeks. And we want to remind you to visit ShakespeareOxfordFellowship.org, ShakespeareOxfordFellowship.org for all your information that you could possibly need or want about the Shakespeare authorship question and Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford. Be sure to get your swag on, your drag on swag on at Dragon Wagon Radio. Would you please go buy a Don't Quill the Messenger t-shirt and proudly wear your Quiller colors? I know I do. And every time I wear my shirt, somebody asks me about the podcast. So if you'll get one, people will ask you about the podcast and you can help spread the word. Our numbers continue to grow and we love it when you give us a like or a review on the site because that helps our numbers grow and helps move us up to the top. Thanks for listening, Quillers. And don't forget, keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.